Hello again. My name is Greg, and I am here trying to develop a Christian tabletop role-playing game based on the Bible. Why, you may ask? Well, one of my hobbies is pretending to be a productive adult. Now, one of the things I'm trying to do in designing this game is to try to make it as easy as possible for the storyteller or the leader of the game to actually run a session. And ideally not just run a session, but to create their own, so that they're not at the mercy of depending on someone else's design or waiting for people to develop something for them. So to this end, I want to talk a little bit about a template called the 5-room dungeon and what it means. So the 5-room dungeon was an idea first put out by John 4 on his site Role Playing Tips. The idea is that a simple dungeon crawl can be broken down into 5 areas or rooms, each of which serves a specific purpose in the story. By taking the players through the 5-room dungeon, then the game master can build a complete story with an introduction, middle and ending, and even a plot twist, all in the space of 5 rooms. So this is like a template that the Game Master can use to design and build an easy-to-complete adventure for a party to finish within one session. The thing is that the 5 rooms don't specifically have to be a dungeon. As John says in the book, though I call them 5-room dungeons, they apply to any location with 5 or so areas. They don't have to be fantasy or dungeons. They could take the form of a small spacecraft, a floor in a business tower, a wing of a mansion, a campsite, a neighborhood. And on the same page, he also says, they are called 5-room dungeons, but this is just a guideline. Feel free to make a 3-area locations or 10 cave complexes. The idea works for any small self-contained area. So to that end, I'd like to talk about the idea of the certain number, including but not limited to 5, of indiscriminate areas which may or may not include dungeons or other spaces. Just rolls off the tongue. The 5-room dungeon follows the acronym of Every Player Should Be Ready, which stands for Entrance, Puzzle, Setback, Battle, and Reward. So the first room is the Entrance and Guardian. This is the beginning of the dungeon, and it's supposed to inform the party about why this dungeon, or whatever it is, hasn't already been plundered. This serves as an introduction to the dungeon and gives them an indication of what is in store. So for instance, if it is a dungeon filled with enemies, then put an example of the enemy at the beginning to act as a guard. If it is a stronghold, it would be a sentry. If it was a nightclub, it would be a bouncer. If it's an office building, it would probably be a person at the reception. Alternatively, it could be a puzzle or a trap that the players need to figure out, like an entry code or a password. Basically, this room sets up either an early combat to get past the guard or a puzzle to enter. The next room is called the puzzle, or the role-playing challenge. Ideally, this is basically the opposite kind of challenge than the first room. If the first room was combat in dealing with a guard, then this is a puzzle to solve, or a role-playing encounter with someone. If the first room was a puzzle, then this should be a combat. Basically, just don't put the 2 of the same room together. If it is a combat, then maybe it's a wandering security guard, or an enemy walks in, something like that. The idea is that you're trying to incorporate different players with different skills as much as possible. The third room is the setback, or trick. This room should be a twist to add tension. The idea is that the players think they have reached their goal, but it's a setup or trick and they have to figure a way out. The idea with this is to either cater to any other player that hasn't already been catered to, that is to use their skills, or if everyone has already been catered to, then give them more of what they like, whatever it is. Combat, role-play, puzzles, whatever. But essentially, this stage is to raise tension and reveal any traps or complications. Room 4 is the climax, the big battle, or the conflict. This is the final combat or conflict of the dungeon, and it should be memorable and difficult for the party to win. Ideally, it should be consistent with the story of the dungeon and with the objective of what they're trying to achieve. But this should be an interesting and difficult conflict. Lots of different terrain, lots of maybe different objectives, a time limit, whatever. Finally, Room number 5 is the reward or revelation, where the players get what they're looking for, like money or treasure or loot or whatever. However, it can also be a plot twist. Perhaps the real villain is now revealed. It wasn't who they thought it was, now it's somebody else. Or maybe it leads to more clues, to a wider mystery. Maybe it's a trap, and there's a countdown before a bomb goes off. Maybe the real treasure was the friends we made along the way. Whatever it is, give opportunity to either reward the players or lead them to the next stage. Now, those of you who study stories and are familiar with narrative structures will recognize this structure as being similar to other stories, such as the 3-act structure, that is setup, confrontation, and resolution, with Act 1 corresponding to the entrance, Act 2 corresponding to puzzle and setback, and Act 3 corresponding to the climax and the reward. Similarly, there are other structures a lot of storytellers follow, such as the hero's journey, to create memorable stories, which you can also insert this 5-room structure into the hero's journey if you squint and try hard enough. Of course, one of the issues with using these kinds of templates is that there's a temptation to fit every type of story into the same template, from romantic comedies to horror stories, such that it used to be when writers would write movies in the past, they would actually take the hero's journey and say, well, it's page 36. That means our protagonist has to be crossing the threshold about now. However, at least for a general homebrew adventure, this 5-room structure can be an easy and quick way to design and prepare a number of different stories, particularly if you're willing to try and think outside the box a bit. For example, within the 5-room structure, you could have an Old Testament biblical story, such as the players are spies going into Jericho, tasked with finding out information. So the entrance would be the guard at the gate that they have to get past. The puzzle would be finding and meeting Rahab, convincing her to not just hand them over to the palace guard. The setback would be being discovered by the guards and either hiding or talking their way out or maybe fighting their way out. The battle would be then trying to escape, again, either by negotiating or straight up combat, and the resolution would be escaping over the wall using Rahab's help. Similarly, you could do a thriller story, such as the players are trying to track down a child who is lost and they find a clue leading to an old house. The entrance could then be a guardian to get past, like a guard dog or something like that. Inside then could be the owner who has the child but is trying to kidnap them, so they need to figure this out. The setback would be the owner of the house locking or possibly trapping them in a room where they need to escape. The battle will be then somehow defeating the owner, getting past them, getting them to reveal where the child is, and the resolution is escaping with the child to safety. You could also have a mystery, where a murder has been committed, so the entrance is the examination of the scene of the crime and gathering evidence. The puzzle would then be interviewing the suspects for some role-playing. The setback would be something like some evidence turns out to be wrong or a red herring, or maybe the chief suspect also winds up dead, as they often do, or something else. The battle is the players finding out who the murderer is and confronting them, and then possibly trying to escape. And the resolution is they either defeat or chase down the murderer and resolve it. Anyway, so the upshot is that I think the 5-room dungeon can be used and adapted as the session leader sees fit to incorporate an easy story structure without it being so restrictive that it has to just apply to a dungeon crawl. And that's all I wanted to say. Next time, I want to talk a bit more about story scaffolding and a way to do it to create some simple campaign-style adventures. Not in a way that is too long form, but hopefully in a way that sort of includes everybody or can include everybody. As always, if you're interested in what I'm doing here and trying to build a biblical TTRPG and want to follow my journey, please like and subscribe. Otherwise, if not, thank you for watching.